I think this year, like for the last couple of years, we talked about Azure, AWS, you saw me throw them out, IBM, Oracle, Google, all playing in public cloud. But it seemed like overwhelmingly by the second half of this year, we were talking hybrid cloud. We were really, the OEMs are all launching, Dell Tech and VMware. You've got Cisco going down that road, big moves with HPE and GreenLake. But you also have IBM, Red Hat acquisition finally starting to really materialize and make sense. Oracle's cloud at customer and a number of things that Oracle's doing. By the way, Oracle had some big wins, winning pieces of business from the likes of Zoom and 8x8, Donald's and others. Google keeps chugging along, doing some really interesting work. So, I kind of hit them all, and I'm going to leave the two biggies for you. But I mean, this was a really big year for people starting to kind of say, not all the work's going to the public cloud, but it's not all going to be on-prem either. We heard the container revolution, Kubernetes, all these things are happening because what companies are really realizing is it takes a village. And that village is on-prem, that village is private cloud, that village is public cloud. And of course, the big cloud players are making big moves here too.
Yeah, this year, it's funny, when Andy Jassy stepped on stage last year is kind of when I thought that hybrid was real. But I liked your comment on people really filling in the gaps on that. And AWS Outposts, I mean, it's everywhere. You can get it 1U, 2U, rack. You can get wavelength if you want it in a carrier. You can not even have an outposts, and AWS will have a little mini data center in, let's say, Los Angeles vicinity where you can get this. And hats off to I guess Microsoft, who really started this with Azure Stack. And then I thought Google really made it kind of real with Anthos, right? In saying this is our strategy. So I think it's game on, right? You have the classic on-prem folks moving toward the cloud, and you have the cloud folks moving toward the middle, all aiming for that hybrid area. I mean, now pretty much everybody has a way to manage containers on anybody's infrastructure as well. And I'm trying to think through, how do people differentiate themselves when it all kind of looks the same? And I thought we saw some really interesting stuff from Oracle and IBM and HPE on going vertical. These are areas where I think those companies can do really well. First off, and I'll cite Andy Jassy again, over 90% of the money is still on-prem, right? And what that means is the data's on-prem, and HPE, for instance, going deep with high-performance computing. A good example there. IBM's financial cloud, where they're going vertical. Oracle had a carrier cloud, and those are obviously places where those three vendors I just cited were very strong. And it's an element where subject matter expertise matters as opposed to going kind of a horizontal IaaS.
Yeah, I love that you point that out too. I think the verticalization of almost every partition of tech, whether that's, AI, ML for sales and marketing versus conversation recommenders versus, our friend, at C3 AI built an entire platform, went public, by the way, tripled in valuation along the idea of being able to deploy rapidly right on top of CRM, a vertical stack for AI. But I'm saying we're seeing that kind of hit across every single wave, and the cloud providers are really figuring out like, hey, if we can, like IBM with the fintechs, we did the Bank of America deal, or you had the Splunk and HPE partnership for Wells Fargo get announced. Like just these different types of deals that were very verticalized and saying, if we can do it for this giant bank, we can do it for that giant bank, or if we can do it for this big retailer, we can do it for that big retailer. So we saw a lot of verticalization, and we saw, companies really figuring out how to lean into differentiation, because that is going to be hard. But by the way, Pat, one more thing before we kind of, I'd like to talk a little about cloud and SaaS to end up here. But one more thing on this particular topic is the industry is going to grow as a whole. By the way, everything is. This can be chips. This can be software. And the thing is, I think sometimes people can't get their mind around the fact that these numbers aren't finite. So Andy Jassy pointed out 90% is still on-prem, but they're doing $10 billion a quarter. You have a huge growth in the cloud, and there's going to be a huge shift. And what I'm saying is, it's not going to be a winner takes all. Okay, look, Amazon and AWS will continue to grow double digits for the foreseeable future. So will Azure. So will Google. Likely, so will IBM, and so will Oracle. And the point is that's because the whole cloud is growing. Same thing with chips. AWS is getting into chips, and Microsoft will get into chips, and Apple will get into chips. Intel can still grow. AMD can still grow. And I think people really need to put their head around the fact that the tech industry is getting bigger, and the need is going to get bigger, and the market opportunity is going to keep getting bigger. Pat, I know you're probably jonesing to say something, but it just bothers me when I keep hearing the kind of winner takes all thing. All these companies can stand out on differentiation. The OEMs too, Dell's, HPE, Cisco's, all of them can grow if they execute.
Yeah, well, and here's what's happening. IT budgets aren't getting bigger, but here's what's happening is segments of the economy are becoming more governed by technology. So for instance, Tesla never existed. They came out of thin air in technology. Transportation. AWS is replacing FedEx and UPS and even short haul vendors by vertically integrating. So what you have is, in agreeing with your macro point, is that everybody can grow and everything is growing because tech is starting to take over certain elements of other industries. I mean, look at groceries, right? And how Amazon has gotten into that. Look at Instacart and how it's gotten into that. Look at the before COVID hit, the amount of budget that let's say an Uber provided and the services that they provided to it. So economies aren't necessarily getting bigger, but tech is a larger portion of that. And you can look at just the S&P 500 and the Dow Industrials, and as a percentage of tech as GDP and the valuation in the stock market.